Welcome back to another podcast. Today we're going to discuss validating sources. When it comes to validating sources, there are primarily two types of sources, a primary and secondary. Primary are sources that are created from witnesses or recorders that have experienced the events or conditions. A lot of times this is found in print, such as books, newspapers, magazines, reliable websites, and I'll talk about websites in just a moment, and interviews. Secondary sources are those, sources that are not as strong, okay? Usually secondhand accounts of an event. And so to remember it, like I want you to for this course, is I want you to remember that primary cannot be easily edited. And the same goes, the opposite goes for secondary sources, which is they can be easily edited. And so you'll see there when I give you the definition, it's no coincidence that I gave you the primary definition as a quote from Yale University .edu, which is a primary source. And then the secondary definition is given to you from wikipedia.org, which is a secondary or even a tertiary source as well. And I'll talk more about Wikipedia in just a moment. But when it gets to Wikipedia, all you need is a username and a password, and you can alter almost anyone's information. And so, Wikipedia is a good starting point, but there again is not a primary source. Primary sources are usually, like I said, books, articles, journals, magazines, newspapers, film. A lot of people forget about film. But it's film that has been published. For example, if you see a documentary, you found that on YouTube, that would be perfectly acceptable to me. But you wouldn't want to get a video two people put together in their backyard about the conspiracy of Star Wars. That would not, in my opinion, be a primary source. And when it comes down to primary and secondary sources, as you progress through your education and you take other English courses, you'll want to clear that up with your instructor, because it's always a case-by-case basis, and I know it's hard to understand, but one teacher doesn't always teach like the other. Secondary sources are often unreliable sources. They're second-hand accounts or even third-hand accounts, emails, certain websites, like I said, other than first-person accounts. No big mystery there. Now, when it comes to websites, this is for this class and this class alone, but I've already categorized, or I usually categorize websites into these two categories of primary and secondary. First, primary, any .edu, .mil, .gov was always a primary source because it cannot be easily edited. They usually have different security measures or stronger security measures in order to alter or access the websites. Magnolia Database is another primary source. Magnolia Database is a great tool that is provided to anybody from kindergarten to senior in college and from the state of Mississippi, and it's done through Mississippi State University. And you'll find that on any library homepage. You can find it on my homepage. It's there. I'll do a separate podcast on Magnolia Database to kind of show you how to work your way around it and start your research, but that database is very secure and a primary source. Another one is Google Docs. I know Google a lot of times gets a black eye for being unreliable, but I'm sorry, not Google Docs, Google Scholar. But Google Scholar requires an access. It's free, but it does have, it's like a Magnolia database as well. It's a database of primary sources. Secondary sources are .coms, .org, .net, .biz, so forth. Before you let that burst your bubble, I have made an exception for my class, and I usually do. I do realize that libraries are a lot of times hard to access. You don't always have one readily available, especially if you're taking a course online or if you're a high school student. Sometimes in the evenings, libraries are not there. And so we do what most people do, to include myself, is we resort to the internet. And so I have allowed that PDF files to be used as primary sources, even if they come from a secondary site, okay? But that PDF file or whatever that scanned or encompass article is, it has to be published. For example, I could write anything right now on Microsoft Word and save as a PDF file. That would not be a primary source. However, a magazine article or a newspaper article or something that's been published even on the internet could be considered a primary source. So keep that in mind and use that. We will get to how we document sources as we get down through our research, but those PDF files, you'll want to keep a folder or some types of organization digitally on where you keep these sources. That's another reason why I push everybody to get a Gmail account. You've got 15 gigabytes of space, and that's a good place to save those PDF files. And they're not big. They're usually pretty manageable. I use them all the time. Okay, so keep that in mind that a PDF file, as long as it's been published, can be used as a primary source. So while we're talking about what we can and cannot use, let's talk about what we cannot use, okay? Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a great starting point. I use it a lot. I use it to find the story behind the story a lot of times, give me ideas where to go, which direction, but I never cite it because it's not primary, like I just told you. I will show you later down the road on how to find the primary sources within Wikipedia. They're at the bottom. They're the links at the bottom that lead you to more sound resources, such as the .edus and the .gov and so forth. So you can use Wikipedia, but I'm telling you that you do not need to cite it, okay? And so also something else you need to think about is that though secondary sources, I've kind of like painted them in a negative light, they're not bad. You can use secondary sources, but you'll see my assignments will require so many primary sources per supporting paragraphs. For example, your first essay, I think, has you employing at least one primary source per each supporting paragraph. But you may have a requirement of having 3 per supporting paragraph overall. That way, those other 2 can be secondary sources. So don't let that get you thinking that you cannot use secondary sources. But on other types of sources, let's stay away from dictionaries, encyclopedias, and what I call other 4th grade report sources. We don't need to use that as cited evidence. We're into research now. We need to go a lot deeper than just definitions and just what's on the surface. I think I've just about wrapped that up. I talked about both primary and secondary sources and how to validate those. Again, the web is where we're going to find most of our sources, but just keep in mind it's got to be from the right spot. If you have any questions about this, or you have any suggestions, or you see any mistakes, again, please feel free to reach out to me and email me and let me know, and then I'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks.